Britain thought its tanks were unbeatable, until a weapon banned by treaty and secretly engineered in Sweden tore their doctrine apart in just one battle. The Allies believed the German 88 was just another anti-aircraft gun, until it slaughtered their armored spearhead at Arras and exposed fatal flaws no one wanted to admit. What exactly happened that forced British commanders to rewrite the rulebook on tank warfare forever? In the shadows of post-war Europe, German engineers from erupt quietly boarded trains bound for the forests of central Sweden. Their destination, Bofors, a respected arms company with a reputation for precision and, more importantly, neutrality. In 1921, Krupp purchased a quarter of Bofors shares, a move that gave them not just influence but a covert workshop far from the eyes of Allied inspectors. The Treaty of Versailles forbade Germany from building large-caliber guns, yet at Karlskoga, blueprints and steel alike crossed borders with little scrutiny. The first attempt, a 75mm anti-aircraft gun, failed to impress the German army. It lacked the power to bring down fast bombers or punch through armor. The answer came from the past. The Imperial Navy's 88mm deck gun, a weapon with a proven record and a muzzle velocity of 820 meters per second. Krupp's team, working side by side with Swedish designers, reimagined it for a new era. By 1928, the first Flak 18 prototype fired its test rounds, launching 9.4 kilogram shells with a force that shattered expectations. Logs from the period, kept in guarded ledgers and only released decades later, record the arrival of 2 guns and 10 trailers shipped to Germany as commercial machinery. The secrecy was meticulous. Bofors handled the paperwork and assembly, while Krupp's engineers rotated in and out, blending into the workforce. Swedish neutrality offered the perfect cover. The guns were officially Bofors products, destined for export or demonstration, not for the Reichswehr. No public objection surfaced from Stockholm. In fact, Bofors director Ragnar Ackman facilitated the partnership, ensuring that no detail would leak to Allied intelligence. The arrangement allowed Krupp to test and refine their design beyond the reach of international monitors. By 1933, with the rise of the Nazi regime, the operation shifted back to Essen. Mass production began almost overnight, the gun now officially a German weapon, but its true origins remained hidden behind layers of legal fiction and diplomatic silence. The first real test came not in Germany, but in Spain. In 1936, the Condor Legion deployed a handful of Flak 18s against Soviet-supplied T-26 tanks in the Spanish Civil War. At ranges up to 3 kilometers, the 88mm shells punched through armor that was supposed to be invulnerable, achieving a 19% hit rate per round fired. French intelligence noted the great secrecy around the gun, but Allied observers dismissed it as just another anti-aircraft piece. Behind the lines, German officers pored over the results, refining not just the gun, but the doctrine that would soon devastate British armor. By the time the world realized what the 88mm could do, it was already too late. The Allies had underestimated a weapon born in secret, tested in Spain, and perfected in silence. May 21st, 1940. The fields around Arras shook as British Matilda II tanks rolled forward, their 78mm armor shrugging off everything the Germans threw at them. Rommel's 7th Panzer Division, fresh from days of rapid advance, suddenly found itself paralyzed. German 37mm anti-tank guns fired shot after shot, the rounds ricocheting harmlessly off the Matilda's thick hulls. The infantry broke ranks. Gunners abandoned their pieces, and for the first time in the campaign, panic swept through the German lines. Rommel, refusing to retreat, sprinted from position to position, searching for any weapon that could stop the British armor. He ordered forward every available 88mm flak gun and 105mm howitzer, forming a desperate firing line on the outskirts of Whaley. Under relentless machine gun fire, his aide, Lieutenant Helmuth von der Most, was struck down at his side. The cost was staggering: 400 German dead in a single afternoon, more than Rommel had lost in the entire campaign up to that point. The first 88mm shells screamed across the fields, slamming into the Matildas from over 1 mile away. Where smaller guns had failed, the 88s punched clean through the British tanks, igniting ammunition and sending turrets flying. A gunner's log captured the moment. Matildas brewed up like matches after the first salvo. 37mm useless, 88mm king. The tide turned in minutes. British tanks, which had seemed invincible, burned in the open. The counterattack faltered, then collapsed. But the chaos had left its mark. Rommel's own account described the confusion and fear, the sense that the entire front might buckle. The 88 had saved the division, but only just. News of the battle raced up the chain of command. Hitler, convinced the Allies were about to launch a massive counteroffensive, ordered the panzers to halt outside Dunkirk. The real lesson, though, burned into Rommel's memory. The only thing that had stopped the British was a weapon designed for shooting planes out of the sky, pressed into service by sheer necessity. From that day, Rommel would never again trust conventional anti-tank tactics alone. The 88, once a secret project born in violation of treaties, had become the backbone of his doctrine. Every future battle would be shaped by the memory of Arras, by the knowledge that, in a moment of crisis, only the 88 could stand between victory and disaster. April 1941. The siege of Tobruk had dragged on for weeks, with Rommel determined to break the Australian defense and open the road to Egypt. His panzers lunged at the perimeter, expecting a swift breakthrough. But General Leslie Morshead, commanding the Australian garrison, saw an opportunity. Instead of meeting the tanks head-on, he let them punch through his lines. Once the German armor had advanced, Australian anti-tank guns and infantry closed the gaps behind them, cutting off supporting troops in a matter of hours. 17 out of 38 German panzers were knocked out or abandoned. Rommel's own reports describe the confusion: tank crews stranded, infantry isolated, and the attackers shredded by fire from hidden positions. The defeat at Tobruk stung. It exposed the limits of relying on armored thrusts without coordinated support, and it forced Rommel to study his enemy's methods more closely than ever before. He realized the British and Commonwealth forces had turned the terrain itself into a weapon, trapping tanks in prepared kill zones. Rommel's answer was to flip the script. He began organizing his anti-aircraft guns, especially the 88mm flak, into mobile screens, using the SD-KF-7 half-track to move them rapidly across the desert. These screens didn't just defend, they lured British armor forward, then destroyed it at long range. The 88 guns could be dug in or shifted overnight, always appearing where they were least expected. Rommel's gunners trained to fire armor-piercing rounds over open sights, transforming a weapon designed for the sky into the most effective anti-tank system in North Africa. The lessons of Tobruk set the pattern for the Desert War. Mobility, deception, and firepower replaced the old doctrine of massed tank charges. Rommel's adaptation would soon be put to the test on a barren ridge called Halfaya Pass, where the new 88mm screens waited in silence for their next victims. June 1941. At Halfaya Pass, the silence before dawn was broken only by the distant rumble of engines. British tank crews prepared to charge the ridge, convinced their Matildas could withstand anything the Afrika Korps could throw at them. Operation Battle Axe called for a direct assault. Nearly 190 tanks surged up the sun-baked slopes, their commanders expecting to break the German line by sheer force. But waiting above, hidden in shallow pits and camouflaged by the rocky ground, were just 13 88mm guns of Flak Regiment 33. Each crew had rehearsed their drill until it was second nature. Load, Aim, fire, reload. The moment the British entered range, the sky filled with the shriek of armor-piercing shells. The first Matildas erupted in flames, hatches blown open by the force of the blasts. Gunners worked their weapons at a furious pace, firing an average of 20 rounds for every confirmed kill. Yet the effect was devastating. By midday, half the attacking tanks lay wrecked on the sand, their armor split open as if it were tin. Survivors describe the terror of advancing into a storm of invisible fire. The 88's flat trajectory meant there was no warning, just a sudden, catastrophic impact. Some crews bailed out and ran, others were trapped inside as ammunition cooked off. The supposed invincibility of British armor vanished in a single morning. Of the 190 tanks committed, nearly 100 were destroyed or abandoned. The pass earned a new name among the men who fought there: Hellfire Pass. Morale collapsed. Tank crews who had once felt untouchable now hesitated before climbing into their machines. The psychological shock ran deeper than the burnt-out hulks littering the ridge. British command realized too late that doctrine and courage were no match for a handful of well-sighted guns, and that the enemy had learned to turn the battlefield itself into a trap. November 1941. The British 8th Army hurled its armored brigades toward Sidi Rezegh airfield, determined to break the Axis ring around Tobruk. Tanks from the 6th Royal Tank Regiment surged across the open desert, advancing in waves, confident in their numbers and the weight of their armor. But the ground ahead was marked by invisible lines, 88mm guns dug in, waiting. German crews, drilled to perfection, tracked the British formations at distances where return fire was useless. The first shells struck with shocking precision. Turrets erupted skyward, hulls split open, and entire tank troops disappeared in seconds. The British pressed on, feeding more squadrons into the fight, each one swallowed by the same unseen fire. Orders came down to attack piecemeal, brigade by brigade, as if sheer persistence might finally overwhelm the guns. It only multiplied the losses. In just 5 days, from November 18th to 22nd, over 400 British tanks were knocked out across the Crusader battlefield, with Sidi Rezegh as the epicenter. Axis losses in the same period barely reached 100. The 88mm screen proved untouchable from the front. British crews described the experience as driving into a wall of steel. No warning, no chance to maneuver, just the sudden, catastrophic impact of a shell that could kill at more than a mile. The old doctrine, rooted in cavalry charges and armored mass, collapsed under the weight of modern firepower. Officers watched as entire regiments were reduced to scattered survivors. Reports from the 6th Royal Tank Regiment show a composite squadron leader taking command of the remnants, trying to rally men who had seen their friends and machines destroyed in minutes. The cost was not measured only in machines. Crews abandoned their burning tanks, some refusing to rejoin the ranks, others climbing into the next available vehicle. With grim resignation, the urgency for a new answer was plain. The enemy's guns had exposed every flaw in British armored thinking. The battlefield at Sidi Rezegh left no illusions. Numerical superiority meant nothing against a doctrine built on range, discipline, and the merciless accuracy of the 88. Cyril Joly, a tank commander with the 7th Armored Division, described the aftermath of an 88mm hit in words that still haunt British veterans. One round tore through the turret, struck the ammunition the loader was holding, and detonated it instantly, leaving nothing but silence and smoke. Survivors like Joly didn't have time to mourn. They climbed into the nearest tank, sometimes forcing out its crew, and kept fighting until that machine too was knocked out. In his account, he did this 3 times in a single day. The cost wasn't just metal and oil, it was trust, morale, and the sense of invincibility that British tankers once carried. By late 1941, British reports estimated that morale among armored crews had dropped by 70%. Orders to attack were met with hesitation or outright refusal. The legend of the 88 grew with every battle, but the truth was more complicated. Rommel's entire North African campaign relied on just 2 Luftwaffe flak battalions, barely a dozen operational 88 guns at any one time. By the end of 1941, these guns had destroyed 264 tanks and 42 aircraft. Yet many of the most devastating hits credited to the 88 were actually caused by Italian Cannone de 9053 guns, which fired a heavier shell at even higher velocity. British crews, unable to tell the difference in the chaos, blamed every catastrophic loss on the German weapon. The myth became a shield for institutional failure, masking the reality that the enemy's doctrine, and not just his gun, was breaking the British line. The British Army possessed a weapon that, on paper, should have dominated the battlefield: the QF 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun. Firing a 13-kilogram shell at high velocity, it could penetrate the frontal armor of even a Tiger tank at 1,000 meters. Yet, this gun was never systematically turned against German armor. Sir Frederick Baker, a senior artillery officer, grew increasingly frustrated as War Office memos insisted these guns remain strictly for air defense. Anti-Aircraft Command refused to issue direct fire sights, fearing that ground use would be a distraction or even a misuse of precious resources. In North Africa, hundreds of 3.7-inch guns sat idle, while tank crews faced the 88mm with nothing but hope and lighter field guns. Baker's requests for flexibility were denied, even as reports from the front described catastrophic losses. The doctrine was rigid: anti-aircraft guns shot at planes, never at tanks. British innovation was stifled by bureaucracy, leaving those who saw the potential of the 3.7-inch gun forced to improvise solutions outside official channels. Major George Bridie stood in a dusty workshop staring at the 17-pounder anti-tank gun that no one wanted to mount in a tank. Official channels had rejected the idea outright. Bridie ignored the verdict. He stripped out the recoil system, bolted the gun rigidly into a Sherman turret, and let the hull absorb the shock. Engineer Dabuji K. Kilbourne followed, redesigning the recoil to make the firely practical for combat. With a muzzle velocity of 1,900 meters per second, the 17-pounder could pierce any German tank at range, including the dreaded Tigers. German crews learned to pick out fireflies first and target them, forcing British crews to disguise the longer barrels to look like standard Shermans. At El Alamein, Montgomery ordered a 1,200-gun artillery barrage to silence the 88 guns before armor advanced. Infantry and tanks moved together, abandoning the old split doctrine. Each lesson from the desert echoed after the war. The Centurion tank, armed first with a 17-pounder, then a 20-pounder, set the standard for a new generation. The 88 had forced armies everywhere to rethink what a tank gun could and must be. Doctrine can shatter overnight, but denial lingers for decades. The world's most advanced armies once ignored the evidence in front of them, until the cost was paid in steel and lives. Today, military innovation still hinges less on technology than on the willingness to adapt. The next weapon that rewrites the rules may not wait for permission. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below.